What a lot of people don't realize is that the TKI measures behavior, whereas a lot of assessments are focused on beliefs or attitudes or personality type or style or traits, but not behavior. And secondly is with conflict behavior, you have to match the situation. So the collaborating mode works best, but only if there's trust. Only if people can take the time or have the time to discuss the issues. Only if they're willing to communicate well what they really need and want. Only if the culture and reward system supports the use of the collaborating mode. Each one of the 5 modes only works best in a certain situation. That is what makes it situationally based. So in sum, I would say is not only does the TKI measure behavior, which can change moment by moment, day by day, but it also looks to see, but are those behaviors matched with the requirements of the situation? That makes the TKI assessment very different than trying to measure an enduring personality trait such as psychological type. The beauty of the TKI is people get their results and they find out that they scored high or low compared to a normative sample on one mode or another. They look at that and say, well, yes, I guess I do compete a lot. I always am asserting myself. I want to win. Maybe that's not always good. I now see that my low mode is collaborating or compromising or accommodating. And that tells me I'm not doing enough of that. Maybe I could be more effective if I behave differently in different situations. Let me try that out. And we find that even a second administration of the TKI, just a couple of days later, can fundamentally change for a person. So when they first come out high on competing, low on accommodating, they can become moderate on both and become more balanced. The biggest benefit of the TKI is the self-awareness that a person has more than 1 or 2 favorite modes to respond to any situation. It's a repertoire of 5 different choices. And if the person then learns to read the situation in terms of certain attributes, and then pick the mode accordingly, that person, all things being equal, is more likely to get his or her needs met and the needs of other people in the situation as well. Again, that makes it quite a different assessment than the typical one that's trying to measure your belief or a trait that doesn't change much over time.
So now that you've filled out your Thomas Kilmann conflict grid, let's talk about it. Conflict is important in times of change, actually by the very nature of change. Because of change, what you want in your change may be over here, and what other people have been doing and what they want may be over here. And you may be pulling at each other because you don't want the same thing. So Thomas Kilmann is an interesting way for us to look at how people react in times of change. And there are 5 basic styles we're going to look at. Before we do that, it's important to know 2 new words. One is cooperativeness, and the other is assertiveness. Cooperativeness is actually how you are ready to meet other people's needs, and assertiveness is actually how much you want to meet your own needs. And let me show you this now on the Thomas Kilmann grid. Along this axis, we have assertiveness. Lower assertiveness, less likely to meet my own needs, and highly assertive, very likely to meet my own needs. Along the bottom, we have cooperativeness, which is actually meeting other people's needs. At this end of the grid, we have higher cooperativeness, which means I really want to meet your needs and maybe put my needs aside. And at this end of the grid, we have somebody who might not want to meet their own needs or other people's needs, and we're going to discover that style now. So now that we've talked about the basics of the Thomas Kilmann grid, let's discover it on a human size. And to do that, in a moment, I'm going to ask my colleague Damien to come demonstrate this with me. And before we do that, let's place the 2 words where they belong. First of all, along the axis at the bottom, we're going to place the word cooperativeness. Meaning at this end of the style, we have less cooperative behavior, and at this end of the style, we have more cooperative behavior. And along this side, we're going to place the word assertiveness, meaning that at this end of the scale, we have less concern for yourself, and at this end of the scale, we have more concern for yourself.
Hey, Robert, what do you think of the change initiative?
You call that a change initiative? I tell you what, I'm not ready to roll that out because I say it's not good for our people, it's not good for the company, and you need to go back and figure out what it is you want to do here. I say no to that project, and I say no right now. I think we need to stop this project now.
Hey, Robert, what do you think of the change initiative?
Ah, the change initiative. Well, I mean, it's okay. I personally would have done it a little bit differently because I think we could do it differently. And, you know, at the end of the day, it's not really so much about what I want. I need to put that aside. It's really what the company wants us to roll out. I really think we could do it differently, though. And again, that's just my opinion.
Hey, Robert, what do you think of the change initiative?
Wow, I think it's really interesting. I think it's great. And you're kind of an expert on this, aren't you?
Well, yeah, a bit of an expert.
Well, I tell you what, let's have a team meeting. I was thinking next week we could have everybody around the table and let's take half a day. No, let's take like 5-6 hours so everybody has a chance to share their point of view. Could you do that?
Possibly. Let's talk about it a bit more.
Yeah, let's do a whole day meeting.
Okay. Hey, Robert, what do you think about the change initiative?
Damien, did you used to wear glasses?
Once upon a time.
Oh, I knew something had changed about you.
And Robert, I really do want to talk to you about the change initiative, so what do you think?
I just don't think now is the time to talk about that. You know what I say? I say let's come back to it when things have calmed down. Could I get back to you, say, I don't know, the end of next quarter?
I mean, now is the time to talk about it.
Oof, I don't know. I say let it go.
Hey, Robert, what do you think of the change initiative?
Interesting. And I was wondering if you got my email, the one I sent you a few minutes ago with some of the stuff we need.
Yeah, no, I did, and I particularly like the resource sharing idea you had, where we had, you know, some of my people doing some of your work. That had some merit in my world.
Yeah, and what I say is let's just split this thing 50-50. You'll get part of what you want, I'll take the other thing that I need, and we'll just go down the middle with it.
Well, that sounds possible. I'd like to talk it through in a little bit more detail, but in principle, that sounds like a reasonable compromise.
Great, let's do that.
So, Robert, let's take one more tour around this Kilmann grid, and this time I'd just like you to explain to us the pros and cons of each particular style. So we're now in the competing grid. What are the pros and cons?
Well, the competing grid is highly assertive, not very cooperative, and the benefit to the competing grid is when you're competing is you get your point across quickly and you tell people what you want. The other benefit is that you can actually protect and stand up for the things that are right and that you think need protecting. The potential downfall of this, though, is if you only ever compete, people may not want to talk to you because they'll see you as a cold jerk that doesn't deserve talking to.
Let's go over here, Robert.
Okay, this is the accommodating style.
So, pros and cons of accommodating.
Accommodating is another wonderful style. It's highly cooperative and not very assertive. And the nice thing about accommodating is that you actually you're the oil that smooths over the water. You're the person at that meeting that helps get things done. It's a very smooth style over the rough times. The problem with accommodating is if you only do this, you become kind of like the doormat of the league. And you need to leave your concerns aside, and you're never heard by anybody.
So where to next?
Well, let's go up to collaborating.
So, same question here. Pros and cons of collaborating.
Well, collaborating is highly assertive, highly cooperative, and what you're doing up here is you're actually taking the time to hear from everybody, and the benefit is that people are heard. The downfall of this style, and the significant downfall of this style, is that it takes time. And if you don't have time, you need to use a more competing style to get the point across.
So why don't we go over to this one over here, which I know is the avoiding style. And I must say I'm struggling to see the benefits of avoiding.
Right. A lot of people say that avoiding, they're like not happy to be in avoiding. Avoiding is a wonderful style because it's low in assertiveness, low on cooperativeness. What it means is that you can actually make a decision, you can see the bullet coming, and you can take a step back and say, do I want to fight that battle right now? And if you do, you step into another box, and if you don't, you take a step back and you let it go.
And finally, what do we have here in the middle?
We have compromise, and compromise is actually 50-50 in the middle of everything, assertiveness and cooperativeness, and it means you get something and it means you give up something at the same time. And this benefit here is you can do that. The problem, though, is if you only do compromise, you're going to look like, let's make a deal, gamesmanship. I gave you this, you gave me that, now it's time for this. So you're going to want to do this and know that you need to use some of the other styles as well. The other benefit to this style is you're only one step away from all the other boxes, so you can always adapt to everything else. And that's Thomas Kilmann. Thank you.
So conflict. Conflict is what? If you were to think about conflict, what would you say? Conflict is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it something to be avoided? Is it something you think, yeah, that's what we need to do in our work? The Thomas Kilmann conflict model says it's any situation in which our concerns or desires differ from that of someone else. I mean, I was saying to Alison the other day, actually, that normally I do this around Easter time for whatever reason, and I've usually got a Cadbury's cream egg. How many of us here like Cadbury's cream eggs? Hey! So if I only had, say, half a dozen of them, and there's a couple of dozen people here, there's 5 different styles that you can use to go for that Cadbury's cream egg. You can either compete, you just take it, you eat it, gone. That's about you. It's about what I want. Someone's nodding, yep, that's what they'd be doing. Or possibly you avoid. I mean, like me, I'm not that fussed about Cadbury's cream eggs, so actually it's not, I wouldn't even see that as a conflict. If somebody took it, they took the last one, it would be, so who cares? You might want to collaborate, so there might be a bit of discussion around, okay, so, do you want the top half or the bottom half, and how should we half it? And, would there be a bit of discussion going on? Accommodate would be, no, Alison, you have it. No, honestly, no, please, you have it. Honestly, I don't want it. But accommodate is all about, I do want it. Why is she not sharing it with me? And then there's the compromise of, okay, let's go 50-50. So there are 5 styles around anything. It could be as simple as sharing a sweet. It could be maybe you're going out with your girlfriends. They want to go to the French restaurant. You really fancy going to the Thai restaurant. Do you always accommodate their needs and wishes and go where they want to go? Or do you actually have your say? And at work as well, do you accommodate people all the time? Or do you actually say, no, this is actually what I want? Do you put your foot on the ground and say, no, I'm standing up for what I believe? So as I said, there is no good or bad. It's just that we might just have different opinions, different situations might differ. Which style do we use? Quick look at the cost of conflict. The why would you want to do anything about this? There's a study, I know it's a little bit old now, but I think it's still relevant. £24 billion is lost in conflict. OPP, that's the Oxford Psychology Press and the CIPD, did this study. 64% of people consider that conflict negatively impact their workforce. I mean, have a think about your workforce. 40% of all grievances are relationship related. An HR employee spends on average 23 days a year. More than a month is lost dealing with conflict. And so really it's the most reducible, it's the largest reducible cost in any business, is actually getting people to communicate effectively and to not have the strife that there is in businesses. So it can help improve communication, decision-making, negotiating skills, and basically overall team development, which is really one of the things that I do. I work with leaders to help them build their leadership ability, but also work with teams to help them function more as a team. So, and if you don't deal with it, well, lack of productivity and engagement, low morale, grievances and tribunals, if it really gets out of hand, poor team and company reputation, not the kind of place you want to work in because actually, it's unhealthy. Avoiding, I'll think about it tomorrow. I could tell you stories about all of these, but this one's just come to mind. So, avoiding, working with a senior team in a global bank, and I'd interviewed, 5 or 6 members of this person's team, and they were telling me there's rivalry in the team, there's conflict, there's this, that, and the other, and I go and interview the manager. No conflict at all. So totally, he was in avoiding. When you overuse avoiding, you don't actually notice that there's a problem because it's low in cooperativeness and low in assertiveness. There is no issue. They don't see the need to get involved with the conflict. It's not like they don't want to deal with it, they just don't even see that there's a problem. So when I'd raised the issue with this person that there was real aggravation going on in the team, he was like, is there? Since when? Now, possibly the team are not doing it in front of him, but the chances are that it had been going on for long enough that, there were still signs. So when you overuse avoiding, there's a climate of caution, not really understanding, what you're going to do here. And if you underuse it, well, the chances are that you're using some of the other modes more than you really need to. Work overload, if you're not actually avoiding and cherry picking the things that you are going to get involved in, you're going to be involved in absolutely everything all the time. Missing meetings, avoiding teammates, withholding information, foot dragging, that sort of thing, just not actually getting involved with the discussion. There is no effort, energy focused on, there's a problem here. Great at sidestepping, allowing others opportunities for them to resolve the issue or the problem. Maybe seen as someone who doesn't care, and I think that's what some of the teammates thought about this manager, was that, why is he not actually fixing this for us? Because, maybe he doesn't care, he's not interested, just wants an easy life. So again, it depends on where everybody is. When I say to them, what does conflict mean to you? It's like something to be avoided, and they say those words straight off the bat. I remember there was one chap I was coaching, and he came from an Irish family with, I think it was 6 or 7 brothers. And they were brought up not allowed to fight. I mean, imagine 6 or 7 boys in the house, and they weren't allowed to fight. There was no fighting allowed in the house. So consequently, here he is as a manager of a very large team. Fighting was not something we do around here. So consequently, conflict wasn't seen as a positive. Now, personally, I think the difference between groups and teams invite conflict because there's a safety in, I trust you, I know that we can get this out on the table and we can deal with this, and it will be better. Groups rather, they avoid conflict, they stick it under the table because I don't trust you, I'm not sure that I can actually air my opinions here and I won't be judged. So for some people, they really, really want to avoid conflict, they see it as a negative. And for other people, it's like, yeah, let's get it out on the table, let's talk about it. Competing, my way or the highway. Dun, 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 dun. I love this one. Right, this is high assertive, looking after my own needs and wishes. And actually, as I said, there are good reasons for wanting to do this. It's high on the assertiveness, low on cooperativeness. It's very much about what I want, what I need. And it could be what I want and what I need for my team. So it could be that you're a manager and you're needing to compete when you go to the board to actually ask for that budget that you need for the team to do this particular job. So, as I said, there are consequences of if you overuse competing, what do you think might happen? If you're always competing.
Not perceived as a team player.
Not perceived as a team player, yeah, for sure. What's going to happen with your maybe direct reports or suppliers or people who you're always competing with? What will happen to them? What do you think they'll do?
They'll get demotivated.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, the chances are that they'll end up doing the exact opposite, which is accommodate or avoid. So your behaviour is actually going to push them into what they're going to do is, lack of feedback, reduced learning, and low empowerment. And they're going to say, yeah, sure, that's what you want. Yeah, no worries, that's absolutely okay. So just to give you a quick example of that, could you just pair up with somebody for a minute? I'm going to show you what I'm looking for. Alison, I'm going to pair up with you for a second. So just get with somebody and put your hand against their hand. Decide amongst you who's going to be A and who's going to be B. A's, I want you to push. Push. Who's pushing back? Are the B's pushing back? Yeah. Okay, you can stop now. That's a really quick example of how behaviour breeds behaviour. Your behaviour of pushing is causing the other person to do something. Now, for some people, they might, I might push and the other person might give in, so they might back off. Whatever it is I do, it doesn't matter. There is no right or wrong here. It's about understanding that our behaviour causes the behaviour in the other person. so that when you overly compete, depends on whether you've got rank and power and authority. If you happen to be the manager and you're always competing, you're definitely going to be getting yes people. If you happen to be, colleagues and you're always competing, you might end up that there's real strife and conflict in the workplace. Just depends again on who's perceived as got more status and power. Or you might end up pushing the other person's behaviour into accommodating or avoiding. So your behaviour is constantly breeding or evoking the behaviour in other people. So what you're doing is causing the results or the effect that you get back. And I think that's one of the biggest learnings for managers to get, is to understand that if they want different behaviour from other people, they need to look at what are they currently doing that's causing that behaviour. What do they need to change in themselves to give them a different result? And that may or may not be true for everybody, but just to be aware of what is it that you're doing that might be causing that behaviour in others. So if you're overusing compete and you do it all the time, the chances are you might be getting some of this stuff. And if you underuse it, if you don't ever compete, if you don't compete when it is actually necessary, what might you get? Absolutely. There may be times when actually, you don't have the influence or, decisions not made. Withholding of contribution, delayed action, there might be times where you actually do need to just stand up and say what it is that you want. And that could be quite scary if you're not used to doing it. So that's a real learning of how do I learn to fold my arms in a different way. It's about changing your behaviours at that point. Okay, so then we're just going to have a quick look at typical behaviours in meetings, let's say, that you would get from compete. Monopolising, not listening, exaggerating, blocking, talking over, about what they want. But they're great at standing up for what they want, for what they believe in. Good for getting their own needs met. May be seen as insensitive to others and selfish. Their behaviour may seem to undermine trust and goodwill, especially to accommodators. So it's very much about where are other people perceiving you. If you happen to be in accommodating, you're absolutely perceiving the compete as just being overly selfish and getting what they want and need all the time. Well, it may be appropriate that you do that. Collaborating, the exact opposite of avoiding then. So it's high in both, high in assertiveness, high in cooperativeness. Two heads are better than one. And again, there are drawbacks between collaborating. It takes an awful long time to collaborate, to get everybody's views. So if you overuse collaborating then, too much time spent on trivial matters, diffuse responsibility, people may take advantage, absolutely work overload. Again, I can think of someone I was working with who they think this is a strength, but actually it's a strength that goes into overdrive. When they over-collaborate, they are exhausted and stressed because they're trying to get everybody's opinion and they're trying to involve everybody. And sometimes that could backfire because it looks like, well, you as the manager, why are you not making a decision here? Is it because you don't trust yourself? You don't believe in your own experience to make a judgment here? So it can be seen as a negative if you over-collaborate. Again, if you underuse it, it looks like you're not involving people. So deprived of information from others may increase lack of communication and low engagement. Loss of innovation. You want to know what other people think. So again, it's that balance between how much of this am I doing? Am I overdoing it? Am I underdoing it? And the last one, we've got to collaborate. Overanalyzing then. So risk sharing, as I said, spreading the load. I don't want to be putting my neck on the chopping block and making that decision until I've heard everybody's point of view. So it could be that, I don't want to take the risk here in making the decision if you are always seen overdoing collaborative. Might continue to problem solve when actually the decision was made. Let's move on. Great at seeing both sides of a discussion and allowing others to have an opinion. There are some managers who don't collaborate enough, and people feel like, well, there's no point in saying anything because that person's just going to do what they want to do anyway. Maybe seen as someone who doesn't want to take responsibility for important decisions. Accommodating then, it would be my pleasure. Now, I did say up front that there is no good or bad, but this one is my default. This is the one that I do a lot, and I personally feel like sometimes it's a bit like a doormat, because I do feel like when you over-accommodate, people can take advantage of you. You know, that whole thing of that pushing. If you've got somebody constantly competing and people are overly accommodating, you're not getting your needs met. You're not asking for actually what you want, so therefore you're not getting your needs met. Because it's very much about saying, yes, I would like that cream egg, but you're not actually saying, yes, I really want that cream egg. Because you never really ask for what you want, you don't get your needs met. And there's a tendency to have a sort of passive-aggressive feel about it, because actually, why are people never actually doing for me what I do to them? You know, why is nobody getting me a cup of tea? Why is nobody, you know, looking after me? But actually, because we're over-accommodating, we invite people to take advantage of us. So it's not about other people doing it to us, it's like we are allowing ourselves to be taken advantage of. If you're overusing accommodating, your ideas get overlooked, restricted influence, loss of contribution, and actually if you happen to be the manager, possibly anarchy. Because if you're always looking rather for other people's needs and wishes, your ideas will get overlooked, your needs will be overlooked. And if you underuse accommodating, you know, lack of rapport, morale, by the book reputation, etc., your inability to yield. So there are times where it is totally applicable to do this. It's just being aware of, are you overdoing it? Are you being taken advantage of? Are you inviting people to take advantage of you? So accommodating then, sacrificing, allowing questionable decisions to go ahead. Yeah, because we don't want to rock the boat, we don't want to upset anyone. You know, bending the rules, appeasing others' needs and wishes. So these are sometimes the defaults. Great at allowing others to have their way. It's about sidestepping and allowing other people to get their needs and wishes met. Just be aware of how often are you doing that. Maybe seen as pliable, placid, amenable, happy to go with the flow and not rock the boat, totally. And remember, it's about how do other people possibly perceive accommodating. Compromising, let's make a deal. Absolutely wonderful when it's quick and fast and you want to just get on and make a decision. And for certain times, compromising might be the absolutely ideal style to use. Again, I worked with the National Health Service with a PCT down in London who were moving the power, if you like, over to the GPs. And then when we did a team session with 8 of the GPs who were forming this consortia, all 8 of them very strongly came out as compromising. The thing about compromising is that it's kind of like, I'm not really getting what I want, but it's great if you've got a deadline, which of course the National Health Service, there's always deadlines. We've just got to make a decision and move on here. And so often decisions get made when they're not really thrashed out enough. So you end up with an okay decision, but it's not like the best decision. If you've really spent a bit more time, but GPs are just so overstretched, or certainly the ones that I worked with, they were just so overcommitted to different projects that they would just make deals. They were just like, okay, you want 80, I want 100, let's call it 90, shake hands, let's go, move on. And so constantly just making compromises all the way. I'm sure that happens in other organisations too, and there will be consequences of that behaviour. Because if you're always only getting some of what you want, unless you're really happy with it, I think it means like I'm never really totally satisfied, and if you're compromising with me, you're never going to be totally satisfied either. Now you're going to be okay with that if you overdo it. The compromiser is happy to do a deal. It's like they're not going to spend as much time. Compromisers, they'll just like, okay, let's do it quickly. You might get some of what you want, I might get some of what I want, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a fair split. Collaborative, really, they want to spend time, they want to hear from everybody, they want to involve everybody. It's a very lengthy process because it's high in cooperativeness as well as high in assertiveness. Whereas compromise, it's not really about asserting their needs and wishes. It's about let's just make a deal and move on. Let's just get on with this. So if you overuse, lost the big picture, lack of trust, cynical climate, and underuse, unnecessary confrontations, because there might be times where compromise is the order of the day, might be the thing to do. Frequent power struggles if you're not compromising, inability to negotiate effectively. So, yes, posturing, rushing to settle, eroding a principle, sub-optimizing and settling, it can be. Great at making fast decisions when it seems that the need of both parties, as you said, have been met. If both parties are okay with it, great, let's move on. Just be aware of, are you overly compromising and are you happy with that decision? Maybe seen as just somebody who wants to move on. Just check that out.